The shores of Atlantic Canada and the coast of Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts down to the tip of Cape Cod make up the boundaries of the Gulf of Maine. The Gulf is known the world over for its flourishing populations of shellfish, mammals, and seabirds. For hundreds of years, the Gulf's bounty has fed the region's inhabitants, provided thousands of jobs, and sustained the unique cultural character of its coastal communities. But as humans continue to burn fossil fuels to power our global industrial economy, the Gulf's marine ecosystem has become threatened by warming ocean temperatures and the changing chemistry of the air and oceans. Although most of the carbon dioxide burned from fossil fuel stays in the atmosphere, about 25% of it goes into the ocean, which is why we call it a carbon sink. The big problem is that when CO2 goes into the ocean, it reacts with seawater to form corrosive carbonic acid. As the carbonic acid breaks down, it releases hydrogen ions, which combine with the carbonate in the water, inhibiting the formation of the vital molecule calcium carbonate. Creatures like clams, lobsters, mussels, shrimp, scallops, oysters, sea urchins, and corals use calcium carbonate as the building blocks to form their shells. With fewer calcium carbonate molecules, they have to spend more energy for shell production, which hinders their ability to grow. And if the water gets too acidic, it could even dissolve their shells. Scientists also believe that the Gulf of Maine is especially vulnerable to acidification because of the complex flow of fresh water from the region's many large rivers, as well as cold fresh water from the Gulf of St. Lawrence and snow and ice melt brought down from the Arctic by the Labrador Current. Because carbon dioxide is more soluble in cold water and fresh water has lower concentrations of carbonate and calcium ions, the region's unique geography further exacerbates the acidifying effect. Scientists also worry about nutrient loading, which is when the waste nitrogen and phosphorus from sewage, livestock, fertilizers, and various industries run into the ocean, stimulating massive phytoplankton blooms. Excessive phytoplankton produces even higher levels of CO2 as they decompose, which makes the waters more acidic, especially around coastal mudflats and salt marshes where mussels, clams, baby oysters, and other sea larvae thrive. Rain and snowfall also increase the level of runoff that brings nutrients into the Gulf, and the warming climate is expected to bring even more precipitation to the region. With rapidly melting polar ice caps and more rain and snow, the Gulf of Maine shellfish could be facing a perfect storm of acidifying waters, as ocean acidity has already increased by a whopping 30% during the last 70 years alone. Normally, the ocean waters would be able to take in all that CO2 without too much trouble, but because the chemical changes are happening much faster than any naturally occurring changes during the past 200,000 years, many scientists believe the ocean life may not be able to adapt to it fast enough. And although ocean acidification may be more harmful to some marine animals than to others, the Gulf of Maine is an intricate food web. The death of one species may cause permanent changes to the entire Gulf's marine ecology. But this time, we can do something about it. In addition to taking action on reducing CO2 emissions, we also need to learn more about the causes and impact of ocean acidification on our most treasured Gulf of Maine resources and our way of life. Humans may have contributed to the acid in the oceans, but we can also take steps to stop it. To find out more, visit www.NERACOOS.org/NECAN.
I lost her on Casco Bay, clam digging on a summer's day, and the sea in all its charm won't be the same. Last summer on Casco Bay.
In the past couple of years, the Maine coast has come under siege by a voracious army of green crabs, threatening shellfish populations and mowing down vegetation wherever they go. If the crabs are left unchecked, in a few years, researchers say there may not be even a viable clamming industry left in Maine. Originally from Europe, green crabs are believed to have hitchhiked over to America in the ballast of ships 200 years ago and arrived in Maine waters around 1900. Maine has two native crab species that are caught for their meat, Jonah and rock crabs. But green crabs have little meat and are tough to crack, so they're not fished commercially. Although they've been a nuisance on and off throughout the past century, with a lack of natural predators and warming ocean temperatures, green crab numbers have grown exponentially in recent years. It's speculated that green crabs first decimated mussel populations, before moving on to their new favorite food, the softshell clam. This not only poses a threat to our marine ecosystem, but also our economy.
In 2012, softshell clams were Maine's third most valuable seafood species, worth a total of $15.6 million.
Unfortunately, one survey in Brunswick found that 40% of the clams have disappeared since 2011. With crabs rapidly gobbling up young clams, in 2 to 3 years there may not be any clams left to harvest in many places. Some researchers now worry that the ravenous crustacean may someday get a hankering for the state's most prized fishery, the lobster. Green crabs have also begun obliterating the ecologically vital eelgrass as they clip it down in search of food. Eelgrass serves as a nursery habitat for a variety of marine species, including juvenile lobsters. The impact green crabs will have on Maine's coastal marine ecosystem still remains up to debate. A lot of the old-timers refer back to the 1950s when the number of green crabs surged due to warmer winters at the time.
Oh, it's just a cycle. Few cold winters back in the 60s made short work of them little varmints.
However, as most climate scientists report, the past may not be an accurate barometer as we're in a new era of climate change with an unprecedented rise in global temperatures. Other research suggests that many of the green crabs who arrived in Atlantic Canada during the 1980s may actually be a more cold-tolerant species from Iceland and the Faroe Islands. Some Canadian researchers believe that this northern crab has actually mingled with the green crabs to create the Schwarzen crab, a more aggressive and cold-tolerant hybrid. Although cold winters killed off previous generations of green crabs, anecdotal evidence also suggests that the new invaders have found ways to overwinter by burrowing into salt marshes or moving into deeper water where there are more moderate temperatures. But whatever the case, it's becoming increasingly clear that in order to save our coastal marine ecosystem and the future of shellfish harvesting in Maine, we can't just sit back and let the armies invade to pillage and plunder our coasts. Only by getting the word out and working together can we conquer this menace.
I lost her on Casco Bay, clam digging on a summer's day, and the sea and all its charm won't be the same. Last summer on Casco Bay, if only I'd held her tight, we'd be going clamming every night. But now she's gone and sailed away from me. On a summer's day on Casco Bay.
The lobster is by far the most iconic species of sea life in the Gulf of Maine, a symbol of our state's cultural heritage and our fiercely independent spirit. The large marine crustacean is also the source of a billion-dollar industry, with more than 5,000 licensed lobstermen and women supporting a vast economic and cultural infrastructure of boat builders, lobster trap producers, bait dealers, restaurants, and many more. In recent years, the Gulf of Maine's population of lobsters has exploded, with a record catch of nearly 124 million pounds in 2014. That's nearly double the catch just 10 years ago and 6 times that of the 1980s. But at the same time, lobster numbers are plummeting in southern New England. And the culprit, scientists say, is rapidly warming ocean temperatures.
Huh?
Although you wouldn't have known it here in Maine, The winter of 2015 was the hottest year on record in the rest of the world. And despite a few cold winters, even the cool waters of the Gulf of Maine are heating up. Between 1982 and 2004, temperatures in the Gulf rose up about 0.05 degrees per year, but then suddenly that pace accelerated nearly 10 times faster to about half a degree per year. By some measures, the Gulf of Maine is heating up faster than 99% of the world's oceans. At that rate, the Gulf's temperature is expected to rise more than 4 degrees by the end of the century. For our cool water-loving lobsters, that could be catastrophic. Lobsters are cold-blooded creatures who are sensitive to varying water temperatures. Higher temperatures cause lobsters to use more energy for respiration and less energy for growing, feeding, reproduction, storing energy, and fighting off diseases. As ocean temperatures rise, they become stressed and more vulnerable to shell diseases and parasites.
Looks like something from out of The Walking Dead.
These days, lobsters can roam more freely ever since fishermen overfished all other commercial species, including cod, their biggest predator. But with warmer waters come new threats from the south, like black sea bass, which have been terrorizing the lobster's southern New England cousins. While scientists believe the lobster boom in the Gulf of Maine may be related to less predators in the Gulf and warmer temperatures in the south, if trends continue, even the iconic Maine lobster may be forced to make the trek further north or face extinction. One study has found that the American lobster has shifted 43 miles northward in the last decade, and lobstermen have seen the evidence of the migration firsthand.
I can tell you one thing, Mr. Man. The hot spots are moving up.
And as overfishing and climate change has led to the decline of all other commercial fish in the Gulf of Maine, our coastal communities are even more reliant on lobsters than ever before. We may enjoy our lobster boom now, but as the effects of global climate change push lobsters further north, the future remains uncertain, not only for our delicious state dish, but also our beloved fishermen, our working waterfronts, and the traditional lifeblood of our coastal communities.